meet my bride. Let's go for a ride in my newfangled automobile. Just where we will go, nobody knows, but it's sure a great way to feel. Behind the wheel of the speed meter steel, it's my newfangled automobile.
Hello and welcome to Vintage Car History. I'm Wild Bill, and I was born in Southern California in the late 1960s. This fact, by default, makes me part Mexican, no matter what my actual genetic profile might be. Yes, I know what real Mexican food is, and living in Ohio, as I presently do, the only place I can find real Mexican food is in my own kitchen. And if you go online to the various well-known info sites, you will read that cars, vintage cars, did not arrive in Mexico until 1903. This is simply not true. Much like restaurants around my home that say they're Mexican, I know better. Indeed, in the 1890s, there was a car being designed and built in Mexico, the first to ever be manufactured in the country. So let's take a moment, and afterwards perhaps a siesta, to consider the first car ever built south of the border, which is the Mohler in de Grace. Now, I'll admit that it was in 1903 that the first cars were imported into Mexico, specifically from Oldsmobile, but that was 5 years after Mr. Albert Mohler built his cars in Mexico City, and he had someone locally to put it together, Jose de Grace. Here's how it all came down. In the early 1890s, Al Mohler was a Texan with money, and he got his money through oil, kind of like Ross Perot. Oil at the time was becoming the hottest thing to get into. Crude oil had been used by people since ancient times as an accelerant for keeping fires and for making various types of pitch. But in the latter part of the 19th century, technology for refining crude oil developed, and kerosene, fuel oil, later known as diesel, and gasoline were available to the market by the 1890s. And the only thing that someone who made this stuff needed was more uses for it. And Al Mohler correctly concluded that the car would be the biggest consumer user of his product. So he wanted to build lots of them. But he had a problem. His problem was George Selden. In the United States, the gasoline-powered automobile was patented by George Selden. If he wanted to make cars, he would have to pay this guy for the privilege, and Al wanted nothing to do with it. But hey, this man is a Texan. And he had a friend in Mexico City by the name of Jose de Grace. Jose owned a small company that built bicycles. Al suggested that they partner up and expand the company to include the manufacture of cars. The concept was fairly simple. Mohler would supply the fuel and the money to tool up the factory. De Grace would build the cars and ship them to the USA. Even though there would be a trade tariff on the cars, that was far less cost than paying Selden. And so, in 1898, the Mohler and de Grace Automobile Company was born. Over the next few years, they built some 50 cars. The cars were simple and based mostly on bicycle manufacturer. Their first and only model was a single-cylinder 2-horsepower car, 2-speed transmission with reverse, driving the rear wheels via chains. The car looked something like a square bicycle with 4 wheels, bike wheels, of course. The cars themselves did not sell well, but the engine they came up with was a decent small engine design that was easy to adapt to other uses. And since Selden didn't have a patent on engines specifically, the partners opened 2 more factories in the USA, specifically to build the engines for resale. The first in Pennsylvania and the other in Long Island, New York. Unfortunately, the first car to be designed and built in Mexico was only in production for 3 years. It was simply too spindly and delicate for the road conditions of Mexico and the USA at the time. But make no mistake, the Mohler and de Grace make of car will forever be the one that started it all in Latin America. Thanks for watching Vintage Car History. See you next week. Peace.